Hey, welcome back to Backlog Banner. I'm Timo. Today, we're on the quest for the bestest. Once more, I'm joined by Tucker, Abram, and Tanner. And this week, we are discussing the 1971 William Friedkin Best Picture winner, The French Connection.
Very true.
An interesting movie, certainly.
Yeah.
It's a crime movie, and we know that we have some opinions about crime movies. But before we go anywhere else, I think we should do a little recap of what happened last week. So last week we talked about Out of Africa from 1985, and it ended up at the bottom of the list, number 5, below Rain Man.
Rip.
Out of $7.50, as the old man Pat Hazel once said. But
Yeah,
that's not what that's with that. We're not talking about that movie anymore.
Oh, no, we aren't.
No, we are not.
The French Connection.
The French Connection. He's got his notes. I've got my brain. I think we're ready to dive right in. Let's not waste any more time.
All right. I think I need to start with what is the first note on my page. Yeah, Fernando Rey. I am a Fernando Rey stan. As a Luis Buñuel aficionado, I don't love his movies, but I've seen a lot of them. I binge watched a bunch of Luis Buñuel movies over the summer, and Fernando Rey's in a lot of them. And I've seen some very good performances from him, and I was very happy to see him show up in this movie. And he did a great job. I love that actor. What a fantastic guy. Suave motherfucker, great. Fuck yeah, Fernando Rey. That's all I have to say.
Now, we've started with a fuck yeah, but I'm curious where you fall in the film overall, because you are notoriously not too much of a crime guy. Yeah, I want you to start in that way too.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to put that I have it at an 8 out of 10. Top of the page right there.
Okay.
Top of the page. I really like this movie. Great movie. Fantastic. I realized something as I discussed with Tanner as we were watching this movie, to thinking back to, I say I'm not a crime film fan. I found out that I prefer crime movies when they're from the perspective of the detectives or policemen or whatever. When it is, because I find that to be more of a mystery, more of that kind of drama, which I do enjoy. The drama that comes from it being from the perspective of the criminals, not exactly my cup of tea. Not Uncut Gems, not Good Time, not Goodfellas, not The Godfather, not Layer Cake, not Snatch. I don't like any of those movies a particularly large amount. French Connection, though, this was a great movie.
Now, I would consider myself to be the crime guy. Nothing against Timo.
Criminal.
Yes. A smooth criminal, if you will, but I happen to enjoy a ton of crime cinema. And I found myself leaving French Connection feeling as though I just watched the film that obviously deserved best editing, best cinematography, but was I particularly engaged by the film overall? Not in its totality.
I'd like to say that it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Adapted Screenplay, Film Editing, and Director. And it was also nominated for Cinematography, Supporting Actor, and Sound Mixing.
Well, look at that.
Sound mixing. Good thing it didn't win sound mixing. I didn't think the footsteps were awfully loud, but that was a big important part of the movie. I thought I actually really liked it too. I've seen this movie before. So this is my second viewing. I think I'd forgotten a lot of this stuff the first time around. But yeah, I think this movie is just so atmospheric, and it just paints this super gritty, dark, dirty picture of New York. And then it's like, I like the portrayal of the characters. I think the characters are very interesting and are complex. They're not just your simple detectives. That maybe I think you could interpret the film as having this surface level, but it's pretty easy to get a little deeper to how these guys operate. And while I think maybe there's a little missing in the story, maybe some plot holes here and there, I actually don't mind a huge amount. I just think it's a fun watch, and just like the technical elements. I mean, everyone talks about the chase scene in this movie where he's chasing after that train. That's just so frazy and cool that I can't ignore it. I really like it. I really like French Connection.
Yeah. I'd have to pair with the fact that I wasn't in love with it. I can't say that I really like this film, but I think it's a very good movie. From just where I stand, I wasn't like super engaged, but I think it really grows and draws you in as the film progresses. I think there's definitely that turning point right before the car chase scene that Timo mentioned, when I think the turning point of the film that really caught me and hooked me in was when Gene Hackman, Popeye, that's his nickname
Popeye
in the
Doyle.
film. Yeah, when he's being hunted down by the sniper. And I think, actually, no, I'll take that. I take that back. I think the scene between him and Fernando Rey in the subway, that is really what hooked me in.
Yeah.
Great
That is
scene.
such
They're
an
just
awesome scene.
yes, great scene, and it just goes from there, draws you in further and further. And while I wasn't engaged through the whole thing, I think that on the whole, very good movie.
I think it's a film of incredible sequences.
Mhm.
I think that subway scene, of course, the chase. I think any of the tailing sequences are really excellent. And I think that's where the film strives the best, because what I appreciated about the film a lot is it doesn't rely very heavily on dialogue.
This is a film of few words. There's very few
Yeah.
spoken words.
It's all about the movement of the camera. It's about the way that the shots are edited together. It's about the sound. It's about that excellent score. And I think that, like you were saying, Timo, evokes a lot of tension. It's a very tense film, it evokes a lot of atmosphere. But I didn't particularly find the connective tissue all that compelling. And I think that's my problem with it, because when we're getting into those sequences that we're already mentioning, that's when the film's at its strongest, I think.
Yeah, okay.
It's a little slow rolling in the beginning, I think. And I mean, the conceit is there that there's this big heroin shipment coming to the U.S. through the French connection, the French guys, the movie title, the French actor. And while we as viewers know a lot of it, I think it is a little bit of a stretch to ask the viewer to be like, oh yeah, and the cops know this too, because it doesn't seem like they're super in on like a lot of this dramatic irony that we get, because we just literally see what's happening on the other side happening, whereas they don't, and yet they still know what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put my 2 cents. I'm spinning this in a whole new direction. My 2 cents as someone who wasn't a crime fan but did very much enjoy the movie, seemingly more than the rest of you, I think. But there's two things that I really enjoyed about this film. The first thing is what you were talking about with the trailing sequences, Abram, is just in general how this film uses the detective and police strategies that they're using to track people down. I thought that was really well implemented of them wiretapping, and you see that, and you see them the cogs turning in their head as they're tracking people on streets, and you get cool tracking sequences. All of that I found very engaging, and that's an aspect of the crime genre, I guess, that I find very interesting. And on top of that, I think that is really well balanced between the cops and the criminals. I think getting both sides of the story and being able to actually know a little bit more than the protagonists, and getting able to connect to Fernando Rey's character and Salvatore, and as well as the protagonists of Popeye and Cloudy. I have their names written down. I found that really interesting, and I like that it showed both sides of the coin. And I don't know, it made a much more engaging crime experience for me, because I was able to get the whole picture, which is something that I'm not really used to getting in crime cinema.
I think the whole picture thing is interesting, and I didn't feel that way for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think Roy Schneider, as much as I love him in Jaws, is a little bit of a charisma vacuum. I didn't get too much of a read off of him, but I want to draw an analog to one of my favorite crime films, which is Michael Mann's Heat. Heat, keep in mind, is a much longer film. This is fairly short, so it's about an hour 40. But I think what Heat does so elegantly is it portrays that entire picture. You've got Pacino, you've got De Niro. You learn a lot about them. I didn't feel watching this movie like I learned enough to really connect to either side. And part of that, I think, is intentional, because I don't think that's necessarily what the film is trying to do first and foremost. But that's why I found myself more engaged by the techniques and the more technical aspects of the filmmaking and the way that certain things unfold, opposed to the plot overall.
Yeah. In terms of, well, yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me there, Abram. I don't think the characters themselves were particularly interesting, but I think as reflections of the setting and the aesthetic that the French Connection establishes, they're very good. This film, maybe more than any other film I've ever seen about the era, really paints the picture of like the gritty 1970s New York very well. I think it's probably, I don't know if it's accurate, obviously, because I wasn't alive or have ever been to New York, But in terms of like getting that picture in your mind, I think it's the most effective I've ever seen. And every time they're outside, you know, there's mist floating through the air, and people they're walking through the streets with their heads down. There's trash all over the streets. It very effectively establishes that setting and that aesthetic, and the characters reflect that aesthetic very well, including, you know, on the hero side and the villain side.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, I think the characters, you mentioned them being very interesting, and I think that's true because in essence, these cops they're not good at their jobs. Like the people who like they catch at the end, like mostly kind of walk. They don't catch the main guy. The actor is the only guy that actually like ends up spending any time in prison for like it's a legit crime that we've seen. But and the dudes in, you know, probably because they didn't do a good job, get reassigned later on. Like there aren't like good characters like these. Like the cops go and hustle up the black people in the bar when they need to fill quotas, and like that's definitely plays different on the screen today in today's atmosphere than it did in the 70s, I'm sure. But I think it still serves the same point that like these guys, you know, maybe it's just like a job, and it's not like going out and trying to be like this like protective member of the community. They're just trying to catch the criminals.
Yeah, well, I use hero as a pejorative term. Obviously, they're the protagonists of the film would be more accurate. But yeah, I mean, feeding into the mood and the aesthetic of the gritty 1970s New York, these cops aren't good people. Like morally, sure, they're trying to catch criminals, but it's hinted towards several times that Popeye got his partner killed the last time that he, you know, took a risk on a case and tried to care about his job and took an active role in trying to solve those crimes. And I think that's kind of, and I mean, it's subtle, but I think that's probably a reason why we see him so jaded and angry at the world.
And Popeye kills a federal officer at the end of the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think I like that thematically. I just don't think that the plot services that because they're not that bumbling, frankly. Because Popeye is able to he fucks up along the way, but it doesn't change the fact that he pursues the train. He kills the guy. That's wrong. He didn't bring him in. They didn't really get heads or tails from that. But they rip out the runner boards. They find the drugs. They end the deal. I didn't feel like I really got that theme played out in the plot. And then I really hate the ending of this movie. And I think to put so much of the crescendo of that theme in end cards, I found to really defeat a lot of any kind of thematic undercurrent that ran alongside the film.
Yeah, I think Tucker and I kind of had the same idea. We were very confused about like where the nonfiction elements of the film faded in and crossed with the fictional elements.
Yeah, we're going to meet halfway on this one, Abram. And I think that is a testament to the way that we watch films, is that this movie has a very interesting ending. Tanner and I did a bunch of research as the movie was wrapping up because we were like, what's that supposed to mean? What's the gunshot in the blackness supposed to mean? Does that mean he killed him? No. Did he shoot at him but missed, and that's why he got away? Did that happen in real life? No, we don't know. It was based on a book which was written about a real story, but then this was spun off of that. It's very interesting how the director melds all that together, but I didn't like the ending either. And that comes up from the whole ending segment, which I think starts when they're tearing apart the car to look for the drugs, and then they rebuild the car.
That's very unbelievable.
What? No, that's absolutely bonkers. But maybe it happened. I don't know how any of that works. But they were ripping everything head from tail.
They ripped the carpet out. Did they like staple that back in, or?
Yeah. But it just loses me there, and unfortunately, a movie that I very much enjoyed up until that point kind of lost some steam, and that's really what knocks it down to only a 4 out of 5 stars for me.
I think to that ambiguity point, I looked this up too. Friedkin doesn't know what the ending means. He's gone on record saying that, and I think that level. I like some ambiguity in the ending of my films as I hit my fucking Blade Runner poster over and over again, but I think ambiguity needs to be seeded throughout the film. You can reach a conclusion about whether or not Deckard is a replicant in Blade Runner based on what is established, as long as you're watching the right cut of the movie. It's glass houses a little bit. But the fact of the matter is here, there's an interesting thematic way to carry Popeye shooting at a shadow, shooting and missing, shooting at the wall, shooting whatever he shoots, but there is really nothing to ground that in. And I found myself watching the film in a lot of ways feeling that it was very glossy. Timo, remind me a little bit of what you said about Drive, I think on BLBS one of these times. The film has an aesthetic and it succeeds in that respect, but it's missing something underneath. And while I can find that a little bit more in Drive, I can't find that as well in The French Connection.
Yeah.
Especially if the filmmaker can't find it.
I mean, that's reasonable.
I want to note, just we've been talking about like the gritty and the atmosphere. The cinematography in this film is just like super excellent. It's super well done beyond just like what is shown. I think how it's filmed, the film stock they use, you rarely see a movie of this caliber, especially one that's going to be like played for the Academy and for awards, using such a grainy film stock. It's really, really grainy. And normally everyone's trying to push for the highest resolution, the highest quality, the highest fidelity possible. But I think Friedkin and the cinematographer, I forget his name, like specifically chose to go with this super gritty film stock look to match the tone of the film and the setting of New York. And I think it works really well, even though I definitely notice it. I think it's intentional that we notice how grainy things are and how, like, you know, it's got a feel to it. It's got texture.
Just to provide some context, Owen Roizman, the cinematographer for this movie, alongside other such classics as The Exorcist, Network, The Addams Family, Tootsie, and 3 Days of the Condor. So he has a bit of a resume there.
This really is a gorgeously shot film, and not only I think that the shot's nice, the way the camera moves is really nice. And I don't think we've talked about those chase sequences, but when you really get down to it, it's the way that they move the camera with the editing and the score, which I really think we should hammer home.
Oh yeah,
really
the score is very good as well.
Yep.
The score is similarly sparse. I think the score is a pretty sparse score. There's very few instruments and they play very few notes. There's no like sweeping, you know, orchestral sweep, but it still just works so well, like the boom, boom.
Yeah, I'm into that deep brass, that pounding. Oh man, that gets me. I love that stuff. But to bring it back to the cinematography, if you guys want to talk about the score a little bit after this, you can. But there was a lot of the cinematography that I really enjoyed. I really liked the editing of it in particular. But one thing that I pointed out during our watch was good old Friedkin and his buddy Roizman's reliance on quick zoom outs. They were like 4 shots in a row where they used that exact same move, and it just started to frustrate me because I'm a big fan of interesting camera movement and things like that, but I feel like it should be used in moments where that feels natural. But when you get that repetition of those same unique camera movements, it just starts to hurt my head a little bit, and that frustrated me. But it's a pretty small nitpick, to be honest.
I think the reasoning behind that is that's a camera shot of the age. Lots of movies in the late 60s and early 70s used crash zooms as like a method of visual storytelling. That's just like something, it's not in vogue now. It's like in the late 90s where you've got the really slow and low shutter speed slow motion that's like that for intense moments. It's just like that. It's just I think it's a cinematographic marker of the time, other than like, you know, maybe it's a choice, but maybe it's also just like they're like, oh, this is a cool shot. Everyone else is doing it. Let's do it as well.
I took it a little bit more as a choice, especially when they're on the street and it's happening. I think it adds to the we're losing him.
Yeah, I think it works really well there. In the street.
We're losing where he is. The camera's moving. Popeye has no fucking idea where somebody is half the time. There's a lot of intensity that's built there. And I think that sort of self-aware camera work, I could be being too charitable, but I feel like, I mean, especially in light of some of the other decisions in the film, maybe I'm being too charitable, but I think that as a deliberate stroke, I think that adds a lot to what those sequences are trying to accomplish.
And I think it's important that we talk about these sequences so much because they're the meat of the film. Like the best moments in the film come from these chase sequences, come from the tailing, whether it's in a car or on foot or the car, like a car chase. They are, I think, what makes the movie so good.
Yeah. I think they're what makes the film endure too, because a lot of the what I feel a little bit more tropey elements, the Eureka, the fucking heroine is in the runner board, or even a lot of Popeye like being kind of a fuck up. I felt like what was really fresh still today, what, 50 some years later, were those the kinetic energy in those sequences. I feel like it's really a film of potential versus kinetic energy. And once that domino does tip and there's more happening in the subway, the sniper encounter, when things really start rolling, I think that's when the film hits its stride. And then the ending is what the ending is. But that most of the second act and most of the third act, I think, is really good stuff.
It's cool that you point that out, because the second act is the hardest act of the film to make. It's the easiest to get slow and bogged down and not have interesting sequences. But this film isn't, I think, at least like the second 2/3 of the second act and the third act are all like going and very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I found myself a lot more engaged by this film than I expected to. I go in with a jaded and personally disappointed and frustrated atmosphere when I watch a crime movie. I'm like, I'm probably not gonna. Oh, I cut out. No, I'm fine.
No, you're good.
I think I'm not gonna like this. I set my expectations pretty low because I just feel that the tropes really do not do it for me. But this film really took my perspective on storytelling and applied it to a genre that I'm not a fan of. I really liked the fact that the cops had a personal history with each other. There was drama that wasn't quite played into the plot, but it really fueled their interactions with one another. They had to work with the federal cops, but they had beef with each other, and that was that was never really played into, but I found that really interesting, and I thought it gave them a really interesting personality, because you don't really, at least I don't really see that when I go into a crime movie that's focused on the police. They're mostly just trying to figure out the story of what's going on in the mystery, but I just liked how they interacted, and that form of storytelling ended up gripping me a lot more.
I don't.
Am I making sense?
Mean,
I don't know what's going on.
No, you're making sense. But to be cynical, I didn't find a lot of the police dynamics particularly compelling, especially Gene Hackman and Roy Schneider's dynamic. A lot of it was unspoken, but I wanted to see it. I think the film has an interesting relationship with show don't tell, and it's at its best when it's only showing and not telling and making you fill that in. But then it swings the pendulum to the opposite direction, and that's when I think its storytelling is at its weakest. And because there's not a whole lot about, oh, the case is being passed off to the feds, or oh, there's drama in the department that's particularly special. And I just wanted to see it slow down a little bit, maybe. And like we've been saying, this is, like Timo was saying, this isn't why the film is important. It's not why it won Best Picture. It's because of these other aspects we've praised. But I don't think just those aspects alone are enough for me to hold the entire picture up.
It's important to look at the film holistically. It's one whole unit, and we should evaluate it as such.
Yeah. Honestly, when I was watching this, I was like a little bit confused as to what really made this Best Picture. I mean, I enjoyed the movie a lot, but it really didn't seem next level anything. I do obviously appreciate the things that we commented on, and I'm the one who's highest on this movie. But even I felt like this was kind of just a crime action film of the era. But again, I really liked it. It was just interesting to see that this is what won Best Picture, because it doesn't seem like Oscar bait, which is interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's short.
Yeah, well, just to answer your question there, Tucker, I'll just read out the other Best Picture nominees from this year very quickly. There was Fiddler on the Roof, an adaptation of the musical. Nicholas and Alexandra, a film that I'm not familiar with in the slightest. The Last Picture Show.
Ooh.
I know
That's
a film
movie.
I know that Tucker likes, and obviously the most notable of the nominees, A Clockwork Orange, the French Connection beat out.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, Last Picture Show and Clockwork Orange are two that have significantly more cultural impact.
Yeah.
And standing now, I mean, those are movies that still talk about. Kubrick and Bogdanovich are two of the directors that you hear a lot about.
Obviously Friedkin is still up there as well.
But this is just like, when I think of Friedkin, I guess I haven't seen enough of his films, and The Exorcist is clearly far and beyond his most impactful. But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Sure.
Well, I think it's come to that fateful moment where we must decide where The French Connection ranks upon the rest of our list. Our list of 5 movies right now. French Connection is going to go on there somewhere. So,
Yeah.
as we normally do, we should start at the bottom and possibly move our way up. So, if you think French Connection should go above Out of Africa, raise your hand. So we are in agreement. Now, keep your hand up. Or I guess put your hands down. Put your hands down. We already did that. If it should go above Rain Man.
Oh.
So it's currently sitting below Godfather Part 2.
Abram, the only dissenter there. Interesting. Okay.
Sure. Do you want to ask the last question? Does it go above Godfather Part 2?
Does it go above Godfather Part 2? Raise your hands if so.
Yeah, I know. I knew that would just be me.
Tucker was
that was my place. And when you say, "Hey, come into this with your ranking where you want to go on the list," I would like this to be number 3, but lost. So whatever.
Yeah.
So Tanner and I are
Hakuna Matata, if you will,
at number 4.
Yes.
Well then, Abram, would you like to say some words quickly?
The last words I have to say is that I think from an aesthetic perspective, I love how pulpy it is. I love how gritty it is. I think the sequences that are excellent are next level. But I found that what surrounded that was either a little bit too shallow or a little bit too sloppy for me to be really compelled. So while I would love to go back and watch individual sequences from this film out of context again and study them further and relive that tension, I don't care enough about the overarching movement of the story to actually feel compelled by the entire picture.
And if I may, I'd like to just throw out there why I think this is just above Rain Man. I think with Rain Man, I think obviously my biggest issue was that the writing sort of goes in circles until it wants to hit that emotional beat to move on. Whereas with this one, I felt the writing was a gradual, a ramp up. As I mentioned, I got more and more engaged with the story as it went on. And like we said earlier, holistically, if you look at the whole film, I think the cinematography and the score is recognizable, at least, rather than as it wasn't in Rain Man. So
yeah, sure.
There we go. So let's take a look at our graph to see where it ends up on the list.
Oh my.
The French Connection now sits at number 4 on our quest for the bestest.
Yes.
So now that we've wrapped up our first our discussion for the week, we must move on to decide where the next movie is. Where the next movie is.
Where it will take us.
The next movie shall be. So
where the wheel will take us.
Where will the wheel take us?
I
pulled the wheel up. And I'm going to click spin. It's going. Oh my God! It's going. Kind of going bonkers.
Going bonkers. I'm going bonkers with anticipation.
The number we have pulled up is number 10.
Oh, fuck yeah, we're gonna get an old one. Oh no, it's a new one.
That's a new one.
No shit.
High numbers are old.
Well, we talked about this, I think, after the end of last episode, in the regard of that we aren't particularly excited to watch it, or some of us aren't. Number 10, The Hurt Locker.
The Hurt Locker.
Okay.
Damn it. I already watched that this year, but I will rewatch it for this, yes.
I thought you were saying No Country for Old Men. That's where I thought we were.
Oh,
that was
so close.
Yeah, that's number 12. That was close. But we are going to be watching The Hurt Locker. That is of course, 2008 Best Picture winner, directed by Catherine Bigelow, starring Jeremy Renner, Anthony Mackie.
Interesting. Okay.
Catherine Bigelow's good film.
Sure, yeah.
Well,
I'm eager to rewatch it with a bit more of a critical eye.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while.
I haven't seen it at all, so it'll be good to check it out.
Okay, right on.
We'll never know what Tucker thinks.
We don't know.
Jerome.
Hey guys.
So I think that wraps up our conversation for the week. We will be back next week with opinions, placement, and discussion on Catherine Bigelow's The Hurt Locker.
Of course, sir.
Make sure to join us then. We'll catch you around.
On the quest
for the bestest.
Yeah.
Oh,
that is I'm sorry, that explosion's a bit insensitive in light of the next film.
Let's diffuse that one.
Oh, what a pun!
Tugger
He's
left
gone.
us
Tucker
muted.
leaves.